Welcome back to episode 3 of Growing Corn to be Self-Sufficient. In this episode we're going to be looking at how our direct sown corn has germinated and established, as well as our beans and squash, and how our module grown corn as well in comparison is doing. So let's go and check it out without further ado. I'm in the patch where in video 2, you may recall, I planted our 4 rows of glass gem corn direct. And as you can see around me, we have corn. And the germination has been surprisingly almost 100% actually, which was a bit of a shock because I was expecting quite a lot to be chewed off by slugs and snails, but fantastic results. We do have a slight bit of variation. But where I planted 2 very close to each other in each row, I will be thinning out the weaker plants. The vast majority is just above my knee height at the moment. And right next door to the direct sown corn, we have a similar sized patch here of the corn I started in root trainers. Exactly the same variety, just a few weeks earlier, started in the greenhouse. And to my amazement, it's on average, in all honesty, if anything, very slightly smaller. And I think that would be down to the fact that where the roots have just been contained for those first few weeks, when you put it in the ground, they don't really do anything for a few weeks, where they're just trying to break out and get down into the soil to find nutrients. So looking good for direct sowing as well. In this bed I opted to interplant our corn with the beans inside the rows so they can just wander around and climb up a stalk when they find it. And our squashes I've planted all along the outside on one edge, and this is so they can have some of their running arms going into the corn to shade out the ground for weed. And also we have this lovely bank along the right hand side of me, which every year we do love to have our squashes growing down that because they look beautiful just hanging all the way along. I just wanted to share with you our growing plan for our Three Sisters beds this season, and hopefully you admire my beautiful artistic drawing here. But as you can see, bed 1, which is what I call the old potato bed, we are growing our open pollinated Swiss sweet corn, and we're also growing with those our spaghetti squashes and the beans to go with those to accompany and make up the Three Sisters are pea beans, and I'm going to be sowing those ones direct. Okay, and bed 2, which is going to be planted on the village green, which is isolated away from the first bed, is going to be our Blue Hopi corn, which is a flint corn used for grinding into flour. We're going to be growing pink banana squash and, hopefully I say this correctly, but Czar Runner beans as well. And the Runner beans lorry has actually started off in modules this year. And moving on to our third bed, which is going to be planted in Jungle Heights, which is the bed above our jungle here. And that is going to be our glass gem, which is also a multi-purpose corn. It's that beautiful rainbow coloured one, and that can be used as popcorn or ground into a flour. Also the Uchiki curry squash, which we grew last year, which you can see in our Three Sisters video, which was brilliant, and we still also have a few in storage right now, even though we're in June from last year, which is still doing well. Excuse the helicopter. And the final variety, which is the beans, are Greek gigantes, which this season we've also started off in modules. I'm now standing in front of bed 2 on the diagram I just showed you, and this is a small isolated bed by itself that we call the village green, and it's a no-dig bed that we made at the beginning of last season directly on top of the grass here, which also contains all sorts of weeds like yellow dock, among others. And that has been a great success. We've had hardly any weeds grow back through that. other than the odd couple that have been in the compost we've put down itself, which haven't been a problem to pull out. And instead of showing you the boring, laborious task of me planting up all 3 beds, I thought we'll just follow this one for this video. The sun is shining, it's a beautiful day, so I think it's time we check out what we've got and get planting. I still have in here some carrots from last year, which we left to overwinter, that are re-sprouting again, and they're still good. We've been harvesting these, and I plan to leave a few in to go to seed. So not only will they self-seed in this area, but we'll also collect some for our own stock. We also have a clump of Swiss chard in the middle of the bed there, which is now starting to go to seed also. So I'll leave that to do its thing, collecting some seeds and letting others drop. And behind the Swiss chard, we also have 2 potato plants, and judging on the size and vigour of them, they're not just tiny pieces I've missed in the ground, they look like quite large seed potato sized tubers. So they can also stay in, so we get a harvest from them rather than just wasting them. And all these things we'll just plant around. And the remains of all of our corn stalks from last year, where I grew the strawberry popcorn here, I've left all the roots in the ground and simply just snapped the old stems up to use as a mulch on the ground. And we have 2 very healthy root trainer trays full of Blue Hopi flint corn here, and many of these are double sown because I was unsure how our germination rate was going to be, but I will be leaving the plants that are double sown together, but I will just give them a slightly bigger spacing from their neighbours. I'm initially just marking our planting holes by hand so I can work out the structure and shape of how I'm going to do the planting, allowing footpaths through certain areas to aid harvesting the beans as we go throughout the season. I'm now just placing the corn 10 or 15 at a time in their holes before planting them. And simply just slipping the corn in, putting our existing compost back around the plant, and then giving a couple of handfuls of fresh compost from this season, or that's ready this season should I say, for some extra nutrients there. And on top of that, a handful around each plant of some ash from around the fireplace for added goodness and minerals. And then I'm simply just going to pull the wood chips back and repeat the process. So that is the Blue Hopi planted. I've left a couple of pathways in there so I can wander around and do some harvesting. And even better, I feel very blessed because just as I've finished now, it's just started to rain as well. I'm in amongst the Blue Hopi corn now, and I absolutely love this variety, and it's the strongest growing again for a 2nd year in a row. And I think part of that can be explained by the fact it was developed by Indians in a very arid climate where rainfall was very scarce, and often at planting time the ground was already so dry that they would plant it almost a foot deep which is much deeper than you'd get away with most corn varieties. So I think it really loves the high nutrients of this soil as well, again, which it wouldn't have had such rich soil where it had been developed. Another very interesting observation is that the mass of corn around me to this side is all of the corn I planted from modules already sown a couple of weeks before the direct, and these 2 rows along this side here are the direct corn. And as you can see, actually it's pretty much caught up. Again, there's very little difference, maybe a few inches only, between the later direct sown corn and that of the module planted. And on top of that, another great learning curve is that last night we had 40-mile-an-hour winds, a bit over that at times, and I don't know if you can see here, but quite a few of the corn stalks have actually blown over sideways, partly in the wind, and they will re-establish themselves upright again, but only the module planted seedlings have fallen over like that, whereas the direct ones, none of them have been affected, which again is obvious when you think about it, but it's another reason why it's looking good to be sowing direct. And the Blue Hopi is 100-day corn to maturity, so that's early to medium, which we can get away with, hopefully, where we're growing. Here's an example of one of our Blue Hopis that have been blown over sideways in the winds last night. And all is not lost. They will self-correct, this will grow straight again. But also, if you look down low at corn plants, you'll often notice as they grow, they start to get these stabilising roots which come out almost above surface level. And the Indians would mound soil up around the plants so these roots could get into the ground and stabilise the plants even further. The squash are doing well now and are beginning to meander their way around our plants, shading out the ground for us. And our beans are beginning to find the nearest corn stalks and work their way towards the sky. This is our sweetcorn bed, and you can probably barely see any sweetcorn or me, and that's because I interplanted it with our potatoes that we've been treating as perennials, and I'm going to be coming through and harvesting all of these in the next few days. They've been slightly shading out the corn, which hasn't done it particularly any favours, but it's still in here and it's going, and I think with the increased light levels it will pick up. We had a bit of an issue with the germination rate of this variety as well. It's the first time we've grown it and it was very, very erratic. We had many empty modules in the sowing trays, and it just doesn't seem to have the oomph or vigour than the other two that we're growing. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping it's going to pick up. And the American Indian bean variety, Trail of Tears, is growing really well, which I direct sowed 2 seeds around each corn plant, and they're all coming on well as well now. And I will go around those soon and thin out to just the strongest bean plant around each corn. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and be sure to stay tuned for part 3, where I'll be selectively thinning out our crop to make sure I'm choosing strong plants and looking for characteristics that I'm looking for moving forward. And also, we see it in full maturity. Until that time, much love, thank you for watching, and peace and plants.